The 90s seemed to herald a genre of films that idolized anti-capitalist or generally anarchist male-run subcultures, my favorite of which so far is a movie called My Own Private Idaho. The punks from the late 70s were grown enough to tell their stories, and the wave of grunge set the stage for an audience that was ready to worship these subcultures nationally. My Own Private Idaho is about a society of male S-workers in the Pacific Northwest that lived very much outside of the rules of society. Because of this lifestyle, this community has a lot of feminine traits, such as nurturing and a focus on community instead of competitivity. They also deal with the same issues as female S-workers, namely the lack of protection of SA due to S-work being illegal. That being said, the society in question is very masculine, as almost no characters are feminine in any way. I would even argue that the group this film talks about is more masculine than the other male-led subculture films of the time, because instead of using patriarchy to uphold their power, they show their strength through a survivalism only known to those who are victims of patriarchy itself. More on that in a bit. Other than that, this film is beautiful, with beautiful type and an immaculate use of color. The main character has narcolepsy, which creates a lot of narrative surrealism. The dialogue is either short and punchy or poetic monologues that read as if they were made for theater, and a lot of the music sounds classical, mimicking this classical theater motif. The biggest thing I noticed about this film when watching it recently was how the movie is so similar to SLC Punk, which came out 7 years later in 98. Almost scene for scene at times. Let's talk about them. The first mirrored scene I noticed is the fight scene between the rival groups. In My Own Private Idaho, they're fighting a band of punks, and in SLC Punk, they're fighting a group of Nazi punks. This really showcases the theme of both films being male-led tribalism, and when I say tribalism, I speak no allusion to indigenous culture. I mean groups of men that aren't participating in an individual society, but a community-based one, like you would see in Lord of the Flies, and are taking from society only the resources they need to survive, which in an industrial setting may involve crime. In SLC Punk, they literally name the different groups tribes. These different tribes in some settings may square off for those resources, whether they be physical resources, territory, or ideology. Another similarity you'll notice is the entertainment scenes of the weird European men to the main characters. These men are quirky and bring comedy to the film by showing off their strange possessions and overall supplying a dynamic character to the film. In SLC Punk, it's a drug dealer, and in My Own Private Idaho, it's a John. Also in both films, a romance with a woman breaks up the two main characters, which are quote-unquote best friends. In SLC Punk, this happens slowly as the scene seems to die and the men look to other ways of fulfillment, but in My Own Private Idaho, it's more of a harrowing tale of how the quote-unquote friend chose heteronormativity over homosexuality. A last mirrored scene I'll talk about is when we meet the main character's father, which ties together the biggest mirrored element, the class differences between the two main characters. In both films, we follow two men who are best friends, one coming from wealth and leaving the lifestyle for subculture, and the other coming from poverty and moving easily into a lifestyle he chose out of necessity or familiarity. In both films, this scene is hard to watch as it really sends the message that the real difference between being poor and being rich when it comes to family dynamics is the feeling of being safe as opposed to the feeling of being endangered, as well as betrayal from those you love. Like I said, the comparison between these characters is what brings the overall message home for each film. Spoiler warning if you're looking to watch these, but in My Own Private Idaho, we end with the born rich character returning to capitalistic society and regaining his class easily, leaving his friend out in the cold. It demonstrates how subculture is only a choice for the elite and the privileged and is often exploited, even if these choices are made to escape the restrictions of normal society. In SLC Punk, the rich character does sell out and become a lawyer while the impoverished friend becomes a victim to drug culture. Another character becomes impoverished due to drug use in SLC Punk, which verifiably scares the rich character into returning to normal society. Overall, the message here is that punk culture wasn't sustainable and normal society might have been a better place to be. So in My Own Private Idaho, the main character is the impoverished friend who is navigating a class struggle situationship And in SLC Punk, the main character is a born rich friend who is introducing us to a period of his life. I know so far I've really gone in on SLC Punk, but despite my actual punk friends' protests, it still is one of my favorite films and has a lot of redeeming qualities that My Own Private Idaho doesn't actually have, but I can get into that in another essay should anyone want. That being said, all of this blatant mirroring begs the question, why did we resell the movie? I know that SLC Punk is an actual tale of someone's life. But because of the similarities in the scenes, I feel like the marketing behind this film is reselling Gus Van Sant's film. So, why? From what I can tell, a punk subculture that removes homosexuality allows for an audience that can maintain its power that's given to it through patriarchy, while still fighting a system that limits it and even oppresses them. For this reason, I respect My Own Private Idaho a lot because it represents a bravery that a lot of punks don't have, that being sacrificing privilege and safety, but also gatekeeps, in the best way, a type of gritty punk subculture that I view as more authentic for the gays and the gays for pay.